I'm Jay Pitts, a real estate broker, agent, leader, and investor. For the last decade, I've navigated the craziest of real estate markets this country has ever seen, selling over 2,000 homes, moving in and out of markets, always ahead of the curve. And now I'm bringing that perspective to you. This is your resource, and Real Talk About Real Estate starts right now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Resource, Real Talk About Real Estate. I'm Gabe Pruitt.
And I'm Jay Pitts.
And we are in the studio again this week to revisit a topic that comes up more often than we think, honestly. But if you remember back to our very first episode, if you go back and scroll and look for it, it was called the Z word. And we're talking about the Z word again today, Jay.
Yeah, you know, at the risk of people thinking that our entire podcast is about Zillow, we bring you another episode. No, it's just a hot button topic, man. You know, we try to make this podcast about trends and industry news and the movins and shakings of real estate.
Well, why don't you tell our listeners what makes this Zillow episode different?
Well, what makes it different than our last one is that we're going to get it straight from the resource. Okay. And by that I mean, touche, right?
Yeah.
By that I mean we have a senior level, I don't know if executive is the right term, but a senior level employee at Zillow Group himself, Mr. Jay Thompson, will be joining us as our guest today. Jay is the Director of Industry Outreach. I can't talk today, man. Industry Outreach for Zillow Group, which basically means that he is the conduit between Zillow and the real estate industry. And he's a bit of a lightning rod, man. Like, this guy receives more flack than any
Some
human
of our listeners
should.
may have seen him in action on Facebook and other social media.
I guarantee it, man. He's all over those Facebook groups, which, by the way, has the Facebook group become like the seedy chat room of like the early 2000s?
Oh, yeah.
Like, the Facebook group is like a thing these days. And I mean, I should know. I'm a member of 100 of them probably. But, I mean, basically, you know, Jay, I think, on behalf of Zillow, really kind of just
has to go to bat
for them. And he is not afraid to call BS on, you know, agents, industry people that, you know, just basically put out there things that he believes to be just factually incorrect.
Well, Jay was a successful agent and broker too. Like, that's an important thing to remember. That's
absolutely
probably how he landed that job.
Well, and I agree, and I think he's got some thick skin, and I don't know if, you know, I know Zillow was probably very fortunate to find him, because in my opinion, as an outsider looking in, he's done a phenomenal job representing them and their interest in the marketplace. But, you know, who knows if they knew that he had that thick skin? I mean, I mean, anybody that makes a good hire would like to take credit for it after the fact.
Sure.
They knew what it would become. And I can tell you from experience that that's just not the case. You know, you make good hires and they turn out to be phenomenal hires, and you seem almost clairvoyant. But Jay's got this thing. He's just got something.
Well, and he's got a really important job too, because you and I both know especially well how many mixed opinions there are out there about Zillow. So I'm really excited to have him on the show today to talk not only about how he feels about some of the things he hears about Zillow, but more importantly, like you said, get it straight from the horse's mouth and hear what Zillow has to say in response, and let them finally, through Jay, get a chance to voice their side of the story. So I think that'll be a really exciting conversation.
Absolutely. And, you know, and I'm sure I'm going to get some flack over this, certainly after the last episode. And
Send us your flack. I want it.
I probably shouldn't say this, right? And I'm not going to name names, although I should. I should probably name names. No, I'm not going to name names, but I got a lot of emails, man, after the original Z word episode that was our inaugural resource episode. I got some emails, man. People didn't like the fact that I seem to be a proponent. And I tried to be very impartial, but I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm an advertiser and that we derive some great success from it. So, you know, it's one of those things. It comes with the territory, and so if I hear from you, I'd love to hear from you. I value if it's respectful, which all of those weren't. If it's respectful, then I certainly value the feedback, but I want to hear it either way.
And if it's disrespectful, what the heck? Send it anyway.
Send it anyway. We don't care.
We want to see it.
It's not going to make me sweat.
Yeah. Without further ado, let's go ahead and give Jay a call and see what he has to say. We'll be right back after the break, and when we come back, we'll have Jay Thompson, Director of Industry Outreach at Zillow. Stay with us.
And we're back, folks. Thanks for joining us. This is Jay Pitts again with Gabe Pruitt here at Resource, Real Talk About Real Estate. And we've got a very, very special guest with us today, and we touched on it a bit before the break. With us is Jay Thompson, Director of Industry Outreach at Zillow Group. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So for those of you that don't know Jay, he, again, is Director of Industry Outreach at Zillow. Basically, what you may not know if you haven't encountered him online and in forums is that Jay was the co-owner and designated broker for Thompson Realty in Phoenix. So he had a career in real estate prior to working for Zillow. Jay is also a frequent speaker at local and national and regional real estate conferences all over the country, ranging in topics from brokerage management to social media marketing. And most often, I think, kind of finds himself as the defender of Zillow Group's honor in chat rooms and forums at, in various places online. Jay, man, I'm so happy to have you with us today because, in our relatively new show, Gabe, how many episodes?
This is our 22nd episode.
22 episodes. Our conversations, Jay, have kind of, been all across the spectrum from, technology to, societal concerns to, where the market's moving to kind of forecasting and that kind of thing. And Zillow has been a real trend for us. It's been a hot button topic where we've gotten a lot of feedback, and I know you understand, but I'm really excited to have you on the show today to speak to our listeners about the role that Zillow plays in the real estate space. And I guess my first question, maybe for our listeners that don't know you, is just give me a brief overview. What is a day in the life of someone like yourself who does industry outreach for a large corporation in the real estate space? What does that look like?
Sure. Well, first of all, every day is different, but there's certainly some commonalities. I serve two primary functions at Zillow. One is what you just mentioned. I'm in the social space. I'm looking for mentions of Zillow. Trying to, correct the facts and things like that. And that's kind of the external between Zillow and the real estate community part of my job. And then internally within Zillow, we have about 3,100 employees. The vast majority of them are sales reps and developers and coders and technologists and economists and things like that really don't have a whole lot of direct real estate experience. So a big part of my job is helping Zillow employees internally understand what it is that brokers and agents need, how they think, what our products can and can't do for them, just to try to give Zillow employees a better idea of a day in the life of a real estate agent so that we can develop better products for them. So clearly the visible side to most people of what I do is responding in communicating and working inside the social space, primarily in Facebook groups, but there's also things like blogs and mainstream media articles that have comment sections and things like that. And so I go in the morning and I start scrolling through my Facebook groups that I belong to. I belong to about 120 real estate related Facebook groups.
Oh gosh. And you're still here. You're still breathing.
Yeah. And I half jokingly say that I monitor 120 groups, which is about 119 too many, but it is what it is, and they're out there. Now, some of those, to be fair, a lot of that 120 are very low level, pretty inactive groups. But
Right.
as you know, there's some that have 50 to 70,000 real estate agents and get, hundreds of posts a day. Not all about Zillow, but just they're very active groups. So, out of the 120 that I monitor, probably 20 of them there's almost something every day, not necessarily about Zillow, but there's some kind of activity within the group.
Wow. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely, man. And I've attempted to drop in on behalf of both you and Zillow Group at times to impart, factual information in the face of kind of broad-based generalizing. But, at the same time, I get exhausted, man. I get exhausted, and I'm looking at one post or one thread every few months and just can't help myself but engaging. But most of the times I pass. I do the smart thing from my own chair as I stay away, and I let the professional. I let Jay the professional take up arms if he has to. But no, man. So that's interesting, because I hadn't really thought about it. I've actually, and I've said on the show before, I've actually toured your all's headquarters in Seattle, and love the workspace, gorgeous place. A big thing that I was very impressed with was just the thirst for knowledge and the questions that I was asked. I toured with a group of real estate agents and brokers that are, top producing agents from around the country, and questions that I received from staff members and people that we were in breakout sessions with and groups, and just even throughout the tour of the space.
Yep.
I was very impressed with the thirst for knowledge that the employees at Zillow had. And it's interesting to hear that, as part of your job, industry outreach, is to provide credible knowledge to Zillow as a whole as to what brokers are looking for. Because in the end, you guys provide, a free service to consumers that also is a paid marketing service but a support service nonetheless to real estate agents and brokers.
Exactly. And we do offer a bunch of free things for real estate agents too, but clearly our bread and butter and the way we generate about 70% of our revenue is from selling advertising to real estate agents. So that's the big chunk of our revenue and customers. So
I've got a question. Being a real estate guy and now seeing the other side of it and doing the work that you do at Zillow, it's a statement that I think is interesting in the way that it's put, and I think it's a piece of terminology that has been adopted, and I'm wondering what your reaction. Maybe this is just Gabe. May just be like a word association, like we've done before.
We'll see.
What do you think about the term buying leads?
That's a really good question, and I have, even as an agent and as a broker myself, I had just I guess for lack of a better word, a philosophical problem with the word lead. These are people. These are human beings.
Right.
And to me, treating them or calling them a lead, treating them like I'm afraid that it takes away, and I think people forget sometimes that they're humans on the other end of the phone or the email, and they have questions and they need help, and that's a prime opportunity for a real estate agent or broker. Or you got somebody on the phone that's inquiring about real estate. As you and all your listeners know, I'm sure, a real estate transaction is super complicated, and we get it because you guys deal with buyers and sellers and contracts every day. But I can't remember what the latest stat is. The average person buys a new home, something depending on these numbers, it's like every 8 to 12 years. So the consumer doesn't get the real estate industry, and so we're here to help them. So to call people leads, I think it depersonalizes it. But the problem is, I don't really know what else to call them.
Right.
We use words like prospects and contacts.
Right.
Because I don't know, it just seems to have a little more personal touch to it. I've always, even long before Zillow, just kind of thought that lead word is just kind of, it's almost treating them like an object instead of a person.
It's better for metrics than it is for talking about people. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and real estate's a super, super personal business. You got to personalize it as much as you can. So if you start off the relationship with thinking of somebody not as a person, but as a potential check, then I don't think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, no, I think it's they're even further marginalized when you act as though they may be purchased. And so,
right.
So I've always had a trouble with the combination of those two words put together, buying leads. And I think it's unfair. I think it's an unfair characterization that agents that use Zillow and Zillow's competitors, and Zillow and its competitors themselves are saddled with by people who don't believe in that way to do business.
Right.
I coach and train. I'm a broker owner of a brokerage here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I have a sales team, and I coach and train a lot of brand new to the industry agents. And I tell them that they have two jobs when they get in the business. Those two jobs are very simple. They are increasing their size of their sphere of influence, okay, while simultaneously increasing engagement among that ever larger sphere, right? And literally two jobs. So you can increase the size of that sphere of influence in a number of ways. You can door knock, you can do direct mail, you can, pay for advertising with a company like Zillow, you can hold open houses, you can throw parties. I mean, you can do a lot of different things.
Yeah,
but
totally.
A mentor of mine told me there's no bad way to generate a lead, a prospect, what have you. So I appreciate your opinion in that respect, Jay. So I've got what I think is an interesting question. I hope it is. I'd like to hear your opinion on what you think the single largest misconception about Zillow is. What amongst agents, I should say.
It's a couple of things, although they're kind of related. There is a lot of people that think two things, basically. Either we want to eliminate agents or that we want to become a brokerage. And clearly you can't do both, because if you become a brokerage, you clearly aren't wanting to eliminate agents, because otherwise you wouldn't have a brokerage. And the one that drives me craziest, to be perfectly honest, is when people say we want to eliminate real estate agents.
Okay.
Real estate agents are our customers. Again, 70% of our revenue, and the revenue this year for Zillow is going to be real close to $1 billion for 2017. So what's 70% of that? $700 million. Why in the world would we want to eliminate our customers? I mean, and some of the line I use a lot in the social space when people say that is, give me the name of one business, any business in the history of the planet that's been successful with a strategy of eliminating their customers.
Right.
And the only one that people can come up with is tobacco companies, which is kind of funny, but
a little morbid, but yeah.
But no business sets out to. I mean, it'd be like a group of agents sitting around going, "How can we eliminate buyers and sellers?" It just doesn't make any sense. And to the other side of that, to wanting to become a brokerage, that's been since the day Zillow launched. People thought they're gonna become a brokerage. Well, there's a couple things to think about that way. First of all, brokering real estate is not our expertise. Our expertise is building apps and websites and building an audience and connecting that audience to real estate professionals. That's what we know how to do. There's a handful of people, including myself, out of these 3,000 employees that have a real estate license.
Right.
So we don't know how to broker real estate. We don't want to learn how to broker real estate. Could we become a brokerage? Well, sure. It's not really that hard, right? You fill out some forms and you find a broker in a state that will hang their license under your entity, and you're a broker. You could literally write a bunch of checks and fill out a bunch of forms, and we could have been a brokerage. We launched 12 years ago. We could have been a brokerage 11 and a half years ago.
Right.
We don't want to do that. And the argument I hear a lot of times is people say, well, brokers make more money than advertising companies. I was a broker, and there's that old real estate joke that the biggest part of the word broker is broke.
Yeah.
And that's not to mean that, clearly brokerages can be very successful, but what I think a lot of people don't understand is the real estate community, the real estate industry spends, again, it depends on whose numbers you listen to, but somewhere in the order of $12 billion a year on advertising. So that is an awful big market. And we've got about, the last I heard, we have about 4 or 5% share of advertising spend. So we have miles and miles and miles of room to grow by selling advertising. Now, we have no thought or conception at all that we are going to capture 100% of the real estate advertising market. That's not realistic. But the point is, the argument, well, you have to become a brokerage to generate more revenue, to make your shareholders happy, that's just not true, because there is a ton of money involved in exchanging hands every day in the advertising space. And that's
Sure.
ultimately what we are. We're a media company that sells advertising.
So, I've always found it interesting, Jay, and we've talked about it briefly on this show, but I've argued that real estate advertising marketing expenses deserve their percentage of a commission dollar. And what I mean by that is obviously not directly, right? Like I'm not closing deals. Right. I'm not closing deals and sending Zillow a 5% cut, right? But in order for me to, I'm in business. I do marketing. It takes marketing spend to create revenue. And if Zillow is a line item on my marketing budget, then Zillow is in essence, even if indirectly, getting a piece of each one of my commissions. So if Zillow can effectively deliver opportunities or prospects, as we discussed before, to real estate brokers like myself who aim to close them to earn commission dollars, why would they need to own a real estate brokerage? Why would they need to? They're already earmarked in the to the tune of $700 million a year into the marketing budgets of successful real estate brokers and agents all across the country. So why, if you already got the juice, you don't have to squeeze, right? You follow where I'm going there? Okay. So anyway, that's kind of my, it sounds like your defense. I hope maybe I gave you some ammunition there, man. You going to quote me on that? You've got all the tools, man. I've seen it.
Another point is there's roughly 85,000 brokerages in the United States. Does it really matter if there's 85,001? You know what I'm saying? Some people act like, oh my gosh, Zillow is going to become a real estate brokerage. And I'm like, well, honestly, so what if we did with just another brokerage at that point? Yeah. It just doesn't jive.
Well, the people that worry about that aren't giving you their money for advertising anyway, so they would be of zero consequence to them. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, while we're on the topic, Jay, I want to get your take on this. Like while we're talking about some people's common complaints against Zillow, another one that I see online a lot are people saying that because of how big Zillow is, they're almost culpable or responsible for giving buyers, especially, or sellers, I should say, the wrong expectations about, especially, and I'm sure you've heard this, day in and day out, how much their home is worth with the Zestimate and that sort of thing. Yep. What's your take on how much responsibility Zillow has to create the correct expectations for the people that visit their site?
Well, I think we do have responsibility for that. Absolutely. We have a saying internally at Zillow that the consumer is our North Star. And a lot of times agents will go, whoa. So you mean the most important focus of your company is the consumer? And I'm like, yeah, it really is. And then they go, but I'm the one that writes you a check. I should be the one that you're focusing on. And it's not that we don't focus on agents. Obviously we do.
Sure.
But the bottom line is, without a consumer audience, you have no advertising to sell to, right? Nobody's going to buy advertising if there's no consumers there. What's the point? So we spend tremendous resources building a good user interface that consumers like, providing them with the information that they want. We survey and do focus groups with consumers and agents and brokers all the time. So we're constantly asking them and polling them, what is it that you're looking for? What kind of information is missing from the site? What is on the site that you don't really care about that we can get rid of? So we put a lot of effort into the consumer, and because of that, sure, we do have responsibility to that consumer audience to help them understand what it is that they're seeing on Zillow.
Sure.
And the Zestimate, it comes up all the time, and it's come up since 2006 when Zillow launched. And there's a couple of key things to remember about it. First, it's called a Zestimate for a reason. It's not called a Zappraisal or a sales price. It's an estimate. Putting a Z in front of the estimate to brand the word, so to speak, doesn't change the fact that it's an estimate.
Sure.
And estimates by their very nature aren't necessarily 100% accurate. We have links on every listing. You can hover over the Zestimate. There's a little pop-up information box, that'll come up and say, and I won't get it exactly right, but it will say things like, the Zestimate is considered a starting point. It's not a replacement for an appraisal or the opinion of value of a real estate professional. We On at the bottom in the footer of every page on Zillow, there's a link that just says estimate, and if you click that, there's pages and pages of information about how those estimates calculated, what it is, what it isn't. We publish our accuracy data down to the county level. We're not trying to hide anything, and the simple fact is there are some markets where the estimate is uncannily accurate. And there's other markets where it's not as good. And a lot of that depends on the amount of public information, public data that we can get. A lot of it depends on the neighborhoods themselves. I lived in Phoenix, for example, which is mostly miles and miles and miles of tract homes, right? You get these subdivisions with 1,000 homes in them that have 7 or 8 different floor plans. In those situations, the estimate is almost scarily accurate.
Yeah, you can pretty much pinpoint. Yeah.
Now, when you go, I live in Seattle. In Seattle, I was just moments ago walking through the neighborhood around my house, and I'm walking through a neighborhood that has houses built in the 1910s sitting right next to homes that have been torn down, and you've got all these, modern glass and steel, fancy-looking houses, literally right next to each other. That's a very difficult type of thing. It's hard for an agent to comp those homes and get a price. And if it's hard for an agent to get to price a home, it's going to be even harder for an algorithm to do it. And then other things come into play too, like golf course homes and homes with a view, things like that. And and I tell people, I was an agent, and there was places where I could go in and I could run comps, and I could go, you know what, I have 95% confidence I'm within hundreds of dollars of what this home will sell for. And I'll be honest, some agents won't admit this, but I think it's happened to everybody, where you start to run comps and you're trying to come up with a value for a home, and you just go, wow, this one's tough. I really don't know how to get close to this one. Well, the estimate algorithm has the same problems, and maybe even more. We can't see inside the house. We don't know what it smells like. We don't know if the neighbor across the street has a 57 Chevy up in blocks on his driveway, or if the other guy across the street's painted his house purple with polka dots. An algorithm can't see the things that a human being can see. And so this estimate will never be 100% accurate. Overall, if you look at all of those estimates in the country, I believe our median error rate is like 4.3%, which really isn't bad. If you think about what we're trying to do, trying to use a computer formula to value every home in the country, and if you get that within 4%, that's not bad. Now, again, there'll be some markets and neighborhoods where the accuracy is closer to 1 or 2%, and there's going to be some where it's off by 5, 10, even 20% sometimes.
Well, and you probably know this about Jay and I, but I mean, we're of the mind that, the more wrong this estimate is, almost the better, because it's just an opportunity for agents to create a degree of separation and prove to their clients that they're a real local expert. So you saw this
Absolutely.
on Zillow, but I can tell you that the property's worth this. So I don't think it's as big as a concern as a lot of agents make it out to be. It was more.
I don't think it should be either. And and I had clients when I was an agent that are they're the nerdy engineering types that put everything on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And I've had clients tell me, but Zillow says the home is worth this. And to me, honestly, as an agent, it was a 2-minute conversation. I said, well, let's look at Zillow's data accuracy that they publish right on their site. And with the nerdy engineering types, they kind of scratch their head and go, oh, wow, I missed that. I didn't see that. And just like you said, it's a great way for an agent to help demonstrate the value to a consumer. I've talked to lots and lots of agents that have told me, please don't make this estimate any more accurate.
Yeah, that's us.
Because they want that as a lever.
Well, I mean, it's one of two things, right? It's higher than they expected, and that is an incentive to request validation, or it's a pain point that they want to validate is not accurate. And either way, Zillow does the job that I want them to do, which is to create a conversation. Both whether it
and that's it.
That's it. That's it. That's all. I mean, that's why I pay you guys. Like, I pay you guys to help me generate conversations.
Yeah. And our biggest goal, I mean, we're a for-profit company. That's not a secret. It's not anything to be ashamed of. The way we make money is by connecting consumers to real estate agents and helping get those conversations started. And we're not going to go in and we're not going to tank the Zestimate, on purpose to help generate those conversations. We don't need to do that because it's just a conversation point anyway. Consumers, I think, like the Zestimate and are attracted to it because it can give them at least a rough idea of what their home is worth without having to contact an agent, have the agent come over and try to give them a sales pitch. And not that agents shouldn't do that, but agents really need to put that consumer hat on sometimes and think about, what, if I'm a consumer and I just want a rough idea what my house is worth, and I don't want to bother a real estate agent, I don't want to get stuck on some drip email campaign for the next 5 years and have this person calling me I just want to get an idea, rough idea what my home is worth. And that gets consumers onto the website. And what we know from our studies and our stats, even that type of consumer that's just looking for a basic value of their home, they start poking around on the site. They start looking at other houses. They stalk their boss, to figure out what their boss's home is worth. And some people go, well, those aren't consumers. Well, they can certainly turn into consumers. As people cruise through Zillow and start looking at housing, and I've talked to consumers, and I've had people tell me, we just went to look at our value of our house, and then we started poking around, and this home popped up, and my wife goes, I want that house. and they start thinking that way. But, keep in mind that our goal is to connect the consumer to the real estate agent. What happens after that is kind of out of our control. We do provide a lot of training and advice and even some tools to try to make that connection, to help develop and grow that connection. But fundamentally, it's the agent's responsibility once they get that connection to make that contact with the consumer and start building that relationship.
Well, a couple of things I heard there, Jay, and I really appreciate it because, and I'll disclaim, I'm about to quote some statistics that I can't substantiate. I don't remember where they came from. I was told or read them at one point at some point in time, but I believe the prevailing sentiment to be true. So, number one, I believe that the majority of consumers transact real estate at the time that is best for them, but when the timing is best for them, with the first agent they have a meaningful conversation with.
100%.
I believe that. Okay, that's number one. And really all Zillow is trying to do is help connect qualified agents, right, with those people at the appropriate time in a way such that the agent may have a hard time identifying the appropriate timing to approach that person. So that's number one. Number two, to agents, I would say, that don't like Zillow, that complain about Zillow being a for-profit company, I would say that the majority of agents can make selling 30 homes in almost any market in this country in one single year can make a decent living. Okay? And to those agents that hate Zillow, I would tell you, pick up the phone and call your sphere of influence and your past clients. Talk to the people you know, put yourself out there in other ways, and then you won't need Zillow to make a living. And that's totally fine. And leave Zillow to people like me who want to have hockey stick growth, okay, that want to add people to my sphere of influence and want to train and motivate and mentor new agents to the industry and grow in a big way, because it's an effective means to do so. Those are the things. And I frankly have heard, and I didn't quote the second stat, but that 99% of agents don't actually pick up the phone and call their past clients each year. 99%.
It's something huge. It's a huge number, and there's lots of NAR does a lot of surveys. We do a lot of surveys, and that's a really interesting point, because what you'll find in these surveys is some huge number, like 85% of people say I would use my last agent.
Yeah,
but they don't know how to get a hold of them, because when they bought a home from Jay Pitts, they never heard from Jay Pitts again.
No, I agree.
So they're looking to sell the home 7 years later, and they're like, "What was that guy's name?
I can't remember.
Is he even still in the business?
I can't remember." So if they're willing to use their previous agent, but they're not, then that falls back to the agent for failure to keep that contact and that relationship going.
So
That's
then
not Zillow's fault.
So then they find me. Really, I'm not the guy that doesn't call. I promise, Jay. But no,
I know that.
what happens? Here's what happens. They don't call, so their client ends up on Zillow. He gets a hold of me, and I sell him a house. That's what happened, and that's why they hate. That's why they hate Zillow, and they hate me for advertising on Zillow.
because you just stole their client.
Yeah.
Stole. I'm
air quotes.
Air quotes.
Here, which you can't see, but and you didn't. You reached out to them when they were ready, and the guy that or gal that sold them the home 7 years ago didn't.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so Jay, got one more question for you, buddy. One more question, and I have expressed what I have heard, and I've never heard it from the horse's mouth. And maybe you can speak to this, and if you can't, that's totally fine. And I'm perfectly happy going on the record with my opinion. But is it Zillow's? Let me see how I can put this. Intention to increase or decrease the number of advertisers that it works with over the next few years. I mean, and if that's something you can't speak to, I totally understand that. But I'm just curious how market-based pricing falls into that.
I can speak to it a little bit for sure. We first of all, we know that there's 1.2 million realtors, and then there's probably another billion licensees that aren't part of the NAR, so they're not realtors. So call it 2 million people that are licensed to sell homes. We will never sell advertising to 2 million people. And to be frank, we don't want to sell advertising to 2 million people. I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, but there are some agents out of that 2 million that just, to be frank, aren't very good agents. Or they're the type of agent, they got their license to buy their own home and maybe sell 1 or 2 homes a year. And that's totally fine. There is nothing wrong with that. But that kind of agent is not going to have the tools and systems in place to handle the volume of contacts coming in.
Yeah.
First of all, they don't want them. That's just not their model. They want, I want to sell 4 homes a year. I'm going to sell 1 to dad, and I'm going to sell 1 to my sister, and I'm going to sell 1 to my car mechanic that I've known for 10 years, and they're done. And that's cool. So we will never sell advertising to people like that. We have said in our last several quarterly reports and conference calls during quarterly reports that we do, I hate to use the word focused on teams, but the teams of real estate are a big, target's the wrong word. You see, I have to think of every word I say because someone's going to go out there and say, Jay Thompson said agents are targets.
This is a good place to workshop it, though. That's okay.
But we do tend to focus on high-performing agents and high-performing teams because those are the people that do tend to have the systems in place to reach out and make contact quickly with these people and to help them. Clearly, at least I think it's clear, the more successful Zillow advertising agents are, then the more successful Zillow is. And that's why, I'll throw something out real quick. We acquired .loop, the transaction management company, I guess a year and a half or 2, whatever it was, a while back. And there's a big brouhaha. Oh, Zillow's buying .loop so they can get, data off of contracts and start mining our clients. No, the reason we acquired .loop is because .loop makes killer software that makes agents more efficient. And then people look at me and go, why do you care if agents are more efficient? Well, we care if agents are more efficient because more efficient agents sell more homes. And when they sell more homes, they make more money. And when they make more money, guess what? They buy more advertising, which is what we sell. So that's why we buy tools like .loop. We love to help make agents more efficient, and it's somewhat self-serving because efficient agents, again, make more money and buy more advertising.
Well, once again, you don't have to apologize for being a for-profit company.
I'm about to say, no one expects you to be, I guess some people expect Zillow to be a charity, but that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Some do. But yeah, so there's that.
Well,
it's
Jay,
a fascinating business.
It really is, man. And I think you provide our listeners some very interesting insights. And, man, that's about all we have for today, buddy. I really do appreciate your time. I think our listeners will be fascinated to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And, like I said, Zillow's been a trend for our listeners. They've heard my take on it. And, I vowed when we launched our inaugural episode, it was actually called The Z Word. You ought to check it out, Jay.
I will check it out.
The Z Word. Gabe, I'll give Gabe the credit for that.
Thank you.
Quite clever wording. But, I got emails from agents in my market, like lambasting me for my support of Zillow after that episode. And, I mean,
well, you did take a pretty heavy hand against those agents in the episode.
I kind of did. I'm one of these guys, Jay, and I know you know me a little prior to the episode today, but I'm one of these guys that can't help but share his opinion. And for me, if it's not for you, then great. Don't do it. If you don't like what you see, don't look. Like that's basically what it boils down to.
And it's totally not for everybody, and we understand that. And there's nothing we can do to make it something for everybody. I mean, when I was an agent, I despised cold calling and door knocking to the point I didn't do it, and I didn't do either one of them because I just didn't like it.
Yeah,
it wasn't my style. I felt uncomfortable, and if internet contacts, internet leads, whatever you want to call them, is not your style and you don't like working them, then don't advertise with Zillow.
Yeah, it's that simple.
I mean, that's really what it boils down to. I personally, when I was an agent and a broker, and a lot of people don't know this, I never paid Zillow a dime for advertising.
Right.
Now, I sent my listings to Zillow because I'm going to get my listing on the largest real estate website on the planet, because I'm going to get free exposure for my listing.
Sure. To
put my listing on Zillow, it's checking a box in the MLS and it just shows up. Why wouldn't I do that? But my blog at the time generated more contacts than I could handle, so it didn't make sense for me to buy contacts because I had plenty of them. But I still put my listings on Zillow because I don't know why you wouldn't. I think you're providing your seller a disservice if you withhold your listings from Zillow. It doesn't cost you anything to get them on there, and I think people need to get over that angst and hate, if you want to call it that, towards a company, and do the right thing for their seller and get that listing in front of, again, the largest by far real estate consumer audience that's on the internet.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Jay, thanks again, man. We really appreciate your insight. I know our listeners do too. And until we speak again, brother, we really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And, if you get questions from this and you need to come back on and clarify any questions or come back and talk about other stuff, happy to do it anytime.
Oh, awesome.
Awesome, man. So, what'd you think about that, Gabe?
I mean, it's pretty much a validation of everything that you and I think, which is nice.
Which I think we kind of, in fairness, knew it would be.
We kind of loaded most of those questions and leaned into we're right about this, aren't we, Jay?
Well, I mean, it's not like a hit piece or anything, right? We're not setting any trap doors.
No, but I think it's important, the stuff that was touched on, and like Jay said, Zillow's not in the business to put agents out of the business. Agents aren't their competition. It is their consumer. It's their customer.
The thing that I really admire about Zillow and about Jay, being their, like I said earlier, their conduit to the industry, is they know they're not going to please everybody. They're not trying.
Yeah.
If you see the value, great. If you don't, fine.
Well, if you're one of our listeners, you know how we feel about this, and we could go on about it forever. But we want to hear from you, and we want to hear what you think of what Jay had to tell us today. Remember, you can always get in touch with us on our website at www.resourcepodcast.net. You can also find us on all of our social channels. But like we said before we went to Jay, we want to hear from you, and we want to get your feedback. So make sure to find us and let us know what you think.
Doesn't hurt that he's got a really cool name, too.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I was almost a little confused, there where we were getting started before we started recording. We're trying to talk to each other, and we're like, which Jay? Who? Yeah. So,
folks, we really appreciate you joining in. As always, we appreciate your feedback. As Gabe said, visit the website, give us feedback. And as a reminder, our full buyer's guide is up on the website for your download now. Become a qualified subscriber and get the full 6-part buyer book. We've got something else coming in the near future. I've already pretty much got it prepared for you. Keep tuning in, and
just have to wait and see.
There's more to come. Dum, dum, dum.
That's it for today, folks. Remember, come back next time. This is Resource, real talk about real estate.